Hello, welcome to Spotlight, helping to warm the most sodden of downtrodden artistic souls.
Spotlight, brought to you by the Isle of Man Arts Council.
This evening, we hear about a new poetry trail in Douglas, but this time for children. More from the wonderful Manx contingent at this year's recently finished Festival Interceltique in Lorient, including great success for the young Manx musicians in the group Scran. And staying with poetry, a new book of silly poems which aims to raise thousands for 4 local charities. Remember, do get in touch with any creative artistic endeavours you might be involved in, planning, hoping to create, or would really like to, go on, you know it, put in the spotlight. Poetic, theatrical, musical, literary, ceramic, sculpture, drag, film, punk, social media, blah, 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 blah. Email me, spotlight@manxradio.com, or Howard Kane, with an E, @manxradio.com. Be delighted to hear from you, because if I don't hear from you, we can't put you on the programme. It's not rocket science, is it? Now, if you're a regular shopper, particularly around shops in Douglas, you might well have seen poetry in some shop windows every so often, as an Isle of Man poetry trail took place. A fun competition where poets send in their works, they're judged, if they're suitable, of the right length, and the judges like them. They win, they appear on an A4-sized poster, and you have your work displayed in the town for all to enjoy. I've been lucky enough to have one of my own out there in the past, and very exciting it is too. Well, there's now a new trail getting underway, and this time it's for children. Chair of the Isle of Man Poetry Society, Bethany DeLee-Runciman, told me more.
Yes, the Isle of Man Poetry Society are pleased to announce the running of the Children's Poetry Trail 2024. So it's basically a poetry competition, and we're running it for pupils who are going into years 5 and 6 from September, so 9, 10, 11 years old. The poems should fit easily on an A4 page and can be any theme, any style, and you can enter up to 3 poems in the competition. We have a range of prizes. We have 15 first prizes where the poem is designed onto an A4 poster, and these posters are displayed in cafe windows, shop windows, library windows, all up and down Douglas and Strand Street, the Sea Terminal, and they form a trail, a poetry trail through Douglas city centre. And then there will be a trail guide in Douglas Library and Family Library to show where the posters are, a trail guide. And the winners will get an A3 poster of their poem to keep designed onto the poster. So there'll also be 15 highly commended prizes of an A4 page with their poem framed with the border, and every poet will get a certificate for taking part. And the closing date for entries is the 20th of September. So children going back to school, there's time to enter, and maybe the teachers can give you a bit of help.
Yeah.
I've already been into 10 different classes in 3 different primary schools to work with the children, spend 45 minutes with them, and getting all of them to write some sort of poems, and I've left entry forms there.
And are they quite keen, the kids, when you go into the schools? Do they like this sort of writing poetry?
Most of the time,
yeah.
Yes. It's just whether some of them listen or not. But but no, I've been into the primary schools, and sometimes children find it very difficult to know what to write about. I mean, I gave an explanation of a poem about the school clock for the children to go through, and just generating words, just put words down on a piece of paper and then gradually bringing those words together to form lines. Some children are excellent at writing poetry. I've had some wonderful poems that the children have done about a range of themes, not just animals and pets, but those children I hope will enter. But it's not just confined to those primary schools. On the 31st of August, Nihal will come and read poems, and he's the current junior Manx bard.
Yep.
So it's in the family library from 10:30 to 12:30. It's really aimed at 9 to 11-year-olds, but we will be able to cater for all ages. I've got ideas out. There'll be pieces of paper paper, which will be prompts, things like that. And then if any of the children want to enter the competition, they can. The competition is free to enter. All we require is a signature from the parent or guardian, just to show that the parent or guardian knows what the child has entered this competition. And then after the competition closes on the 20th of September, there'll be a launch afternoon on the 19th of October when we'll award the prizes to the winners, the highly commended winners, and to anybody else there who has participated. And then the trail, this poetry trail, starts at the beginning of the school autumn term, and it runs for 4 weeks. So there's plenty of time in the first week when you're not at school to get a poetry trail guide and have a look at all these poems around Douglas City Centre. So the entry forms are around every library, but especially the family library. There's also a Facebook page, Children's Poetry Trail and Poetry Workshops, that you will have the entry forms on, or you can email myself at poetry@manxcats.org.uk, and I will send you by email an entry form. And entries can be done by email, or if you want to post them on the entry form, there's an address to post the poems to.
That's terrific, and it's wonderful, I have to say, having been lucky enough to get one of my poems as a winner in the adult one time. It's lovely to see, you're going around and you see your poem up in the window. So it's a great feeling, isn't it?
Yes, oh yes. I mean, it's open to the whole general public passing by to read your poem, and the venues are always very keen to have the poems up in their windows, because they know people do stop along and read and obviously look into the shop as well. So it pays well for them. Yeah.
Absolutely, and so lovely one for the children this year, and great again to encourage, as you're saying, going into the schools, getting kids, because it's important to sort of get children interested in literature and in this case in poetry and writing and working with words from a young age. Because if you start then it's amazing how it stays with you for the rest of your life. Yeah,
the first school classroom I went into, the teacher said to me, "I'm so glad you're here," because she said that she doesn't write poems, she doesn't understand poetry, yet she has to teach it to a class of children. So she was so grateful that I'd gone in and was able to give the sort of basic idea, not just to the children but to the teacher, about how to go about with poetry. And if you can get poems into children very early on and make it fun, all I can remember about poetry from school were the war poems that we seemed to study for about
Wilfred
2 years.
Owen,
Yes, which are good poems, but not really. It didn't instill into most of my classmates any urgency to do poetry. Poems, they're a good way of writing, because you don't need to use as many words as in like a great big story, but it's a way of conveying feelings and emotions down on a piece of paper. We have 2 judges for this children's poetry trail. We have Jacqueline Shirtliff and we have Dr. Sarah Lockyer. So they both have experience at teaching poetry in schools, teaching English, so they're ideal to judge this. And the judges will be looking for things like interesting words that the poets use to bring the subject alive. Does the poems create a feeling about the subject? Is the poem about the Isle of Man, or is it about important events, not sort of world events even? And does it sound good when you read it aloud? And that's a must for a poem. Always practice reading your poem aloud, because that will show you where bits maybe don't quite go together. And the poems don't have to be rhyming. You can use free verse. I actually think that half of poets actually use free verse rather than rhyming. Rhyming's very good if you can get the words there, and it sounds good when you read it. But it's not a requirement of the poetry trail. Just think about a topic you like and that you know about, and then think of the words, build up sentences, and then just play around with it. It needs to fit onto an A4 piece of paper, so don't make it huge. But a poem can be 4 lines, 5 lines, 8 lines, 16 lines. So just make it fun and make it sound good. That's what we're looking for.
Go on, get involved. Why not? Another adult trail following hot on its heels, of course, with poems due to appear in the early months of 2025. And Bethany, at pains to point out the great help she and the Society received from the Manx Lottery Trust in running the event, and also great support from Sue Jolly and the Family Library. And apologies if you heard the trail saying Nihal Kalari, the current Manx Youth Bard, will be on this week. He'll be on next week.
Spotlight, brought to you by the Isle of Man Arts Council.
So the Festival Interceltique de Lorient is over for another year. As usual, been a wonderful Manx presence there at this huge event. About 900,000+ people there. It's amazing. We heard from Delegate Ailey Sheard and leader of dance and music group Nafani, Juan Garrett, last week. And I also asked Ailey what inspires her to keep working year round. It's an awful lot of work to ensure island artists are always present at this great gathering of like minds.
It does definitely put us on the map. It tells people who we are and what we have to offer, and I think it's really quite incredible that we're managing to kind of punch above our own weight, really, in that arena of huge countries. Everyone's heard of Ireland and they know about Irish dancing and Irish music and all of that, yet to stand on the same stages as these really well-known musicians from those big countries there and to be equally as good is really impressive. But also it's about making friendships and connections. We've got sister countries, Celtic cousins, that you hear those terms thrown around a lot. And especially for the young ones, they make friends. And then if they go back year after year, they see the same people. They make these connections. We've had people meet at festivals. People have then got married after meeting at these festivals. So it really does become part of your life after a while. And it just expands that rather than just... Yes, it's, occasionally you'll dance at, St Mark's Country Fair once a year. It takes the whole thing from just that to actually, this is global, and there's other big festivals around the world where we have Manx representation. But Lorient is one of the biggest ones, and we get to make those connections and meet those people, which then leads to being invited to these other places as well.
There seems to be a booming interest, and particularly about younger generations coming through. What do you think's driven that?
Well, people like Juan, really.
Yeah, I think we were really fortunate in the fact that Cricket was in the revival in those early 80s, and that core group of people that are well documented, with Mona Douglas leading the way along the way, but Gregory Jock and Dave Fisher, David Collister, a whole load of people that were around in the early 80s that really brought young people in through the doors and made it a little bit normal, and probably broke some of the stigmas around it in those 80s. And those young people that were around there, myself, Ailey, David Kilgallen, all those people that were around there at the start have spread their wings and moved and promoted it in their own ways, taken their children, their friends, and pulled it in. And so now it's not just this one event that happens on an annual basis for the Cricket. There are events happening all over the island, and the people that still promote that and encourage it and teach it, they're the people driving, but it's the young people wanting to be involved. And certainly we've been really lucky in the north for many, many years with Mike Bolton, school teacher, who has really been at the forefront of music and therefore dance in the north. And the west is the same with Gregory Jocken, and right the way across the island we've been really fortunate, and we've been the beneficiaries of that from our youth, and hopefully that these experiences will make sure that it expands and grows and we bring other people in along the way.
And it is a celebration, as you mentioned towards the beginning there, Ailey. It's not just, I think a lot of people might just think it's either dance and music, but you've got these other sides, like you were saying, talking about the fashion and the visual art. It's all encompassed in the festival.
Yes, we do try and get some Manx in there as well. They have actually the festival done an official poster all in Manx this year, which is really nice. I'll try and get a copy for you.
Marvellous.
So there's the music, there's the song, there's We have the Espace Solidaire, where it's run by the Breton speaking schools, so they often want to come and speak to people. We've got Welsh TV over there this year. I've been contacted by somebody there to say, have you got someone who can come and speak about Manx? So we've got the language element as well, with all these Celtic nations sharing those roots. You've got Irish, Scottish and Manx are all from the same root, and Welsh, Cornish and Breton. But also, the visual side of things. We've got sports as well. They have traditional wrestling, so we often don't take part in that because we don't have a tradition of wrestling on the Isle of Man.
I must admit, I'd never heard wrestling before at L'Oreal.
It's a big thing during the festival. So the Bretons have this sort of traditional wrestling style. It seems to be part of their culture, but the Cornish have it too. So they send people. So they've opened it up to everybody, but we just don't. We don't have any traditional Manx wrestling, so I don't. Maybe at some point we might send some wrestlers. But there's Gaelic football competitions. There's a running race. There's a sailing competition, I think, happens as well. Sort of just on the fringes of. There's all this happening in the background, as well as obviously there is a focus on music. It started off as a pipe band festival in 1970, I think, was the first ever Brittany Festival, L'Oreal Festival, but it has since grown and it encompasses that. They have a cinematic element as well. So at some point, if there's any budding filmmakers out there that want to make some films, nice fresh things, and want to include them in the festival, that's something they ask us for quite often, and we don't really know where to start. So do reach out if you are a budding filmmaker and want your short film included in next year's festival.
And would you be the woman to go to?
Yes, you can contact myself or my sister Grania. We have I'm trying to remember the email address now, is Mannin, MANNIN, at Interceltique Lorient, I think, .bzh.
The event is now over for another year, of course, and with great success for the wonderful band of young Manx folk musicians known as Scran. As well as performing for audiences of thousands, the talented young musicians also selected to compete in the final stage of the prestigious Inter-Celtic Band competition Trophée Loch Raison, where they scooped 4th place. Come on, 4th place in an event that size. Wonderful. The band lineup of teenagers consists of Frank Jochen and Niamh Milsom on fiddles, Risa Brown and Elith Braithwaite on harps, Daniel Cross on guitar, Fraser McKenna on keyboards, and the band also joined on stage by their mentor Dave Kilgallen and 12-year-old singer of Man and Manx dancer Ailish Kilgallen, who also gave some solo performances during the festival. The overall theme of this year's festival was youth, so Scran fitted the bill rather well. Scran members said every element of the festival was amazing. Scran, by the way, formed in 2015 under the leadership of Paul Rogers, and it has a rolling membership of young musicians from various schools around the island. It's sort of jazz messengers of the folk world. And 2 albums, Nain and Geese, and also docu-film features and high-profile performances on and off island under their various belts. Now, of course, mentored by internationally renowned Manx musician and composer Dave Kilgallen. It was their first trip to the festival in Lorient. Don't think it'll be their last. Let's hear them performing at a brunch session at this year's festival. Finally this evening, a little more poetry, though perhaps a bit sillier, when my old boss, editor and mentor, I should say she still corrects me when I bugger things up and misspell words, which, as you can imagine, is quite frequently, said that she'd started writing silly poetry as a way of coping with a very difficult time in her life. I was, notwithstanding the very sad cause of her sudden inspiration, delighted to hear that after decades of writing highly worthy and educated prose, she had at last joined me on the dark side in writing nonsense. And when it was suggested by one of us, we forget who, that we could combine our dark arts to bring a little light to others in a small project, well, how could I say no? I let my ex-boss, editor, great friend and honorary mum, Val Cottle, explain more.
It's a book of comic poetry which we are going to sell in aid of 4 local charities: Beach Buddies, Crossroads, Housing Matters and the Wildlife Trust. And we've put together 84 pages of very silly poems, which we hope will entertain people. We're going to give each of the charities 100 copies of the printed book, and then it's up to them. They will sell it as and when they like, to raise funds. So we can do with all the support we can get.
So it's bringing joy in so many ways, because not least the content, but also because, of course, it's going to support these charities. But I mentioned it's a bit of a departure, because I think you previously, you do write, and obviously you've written many, many books yourself, and poetry, I think, previously. This is actually the first poetry you've written as well, not least comic poetry.
Yes, I started about 18 months ago, and I mean, this is very weird. It was a very difficult time of my life, and I started writing these very silly poems to cheer myself up. And I've got quite a lot of friends who are also going through difficulties, so I just used to write them for myself and then email them to other people, and it made people laugh. So most of mine are based on real but extremely unlikely newspaper headlines. As you know, I used to be a journalist, so I'm rather devoted to newspaper headlines. And if you go onto a news app, you get these headlines where the story is lurking behind a paywall. And there are certain people, including Rupert Murdoch, to whom I wouldn't dream of giving any money. So I made up the story and wrote the poem to the headline without knowing what the actual story was behind it.
And there's some very entertaining ones. Give the listeners out there a little idea of what they might expect from your poems.
Well, shall I read you a very short one?
Yes, I'd love to hear one. Go on, read one for us.
Right, now this was a headline in The Independent in June this year. A woman files for divorce from husband after discovering he was tightening jar lids. So here's the poem. Courting, he was flirty, and she didn't mind the squirty ketchup resting in the fridge, even if she could never open it. Married, mayonnaise drove her crazy, screwed down tightly so that she could never open it. Later, she would slam her fist down on the jam, shouting, "Helen, blast and damn," because she could never open it. The judge ruled their marriage to have been invalid.
Invalid, it's so clever. And you know what, I can see how this would bring you much joy as well, because the wordplay is fantastic when you're writing comic poems, and you love words, don't you?
I absolutely adore words. I think this is my trouble. My head is bursting with words all the time, so they have to come out somehow, and this is the way they've come out.
And you said it was when you're obviously going through a difficult time, so have you found the process of this helpful to you?
Yes, it's a very quick fix, and then you have to write another one very soon after. You know, it doesn't last you for months or anything. But it definitely is a kind of release of tension, I think. And, cheers you up, cheers other people up.
It does. And you've collaborated with, as you mentioned, our very own Howard Kane. How did this come about?
Well, Howard, as you know, has been writing silly poetry for years and years and years. We're very old friends. He worked for me about 30 years ago or more, I think. And he says that this book was my idea. I think it was his. We can't quite agree on this. But sometime last winter, the suggestion came up that I think it was after I'd seen him performing, one of his poems at a live event, which he quite frequently does. So we just decided to put it together and do it in aid of charity.
And have you had any sort of influence on the sort of poems that he's put in there?
No. Well, he has a tendency towards the scatological, you might say, and I've had to rein him in occasionally. But I've tried not to do that too much.
But it's not just about poems, is it? You've got some beautiful artwork.
Well, Pete Hearsey is going to is doing some drawings to illustrate it at the moment. And Ruth Sutherland, bless her, has done a cover design for us, which is appropriately extremely colourful and garish and silly. So hope that'll attract lots of people.
Do you think this could be the first of a series?
Well, I'm still writing poems because I can't stop. So possibly, if this is a success, we might do another one at some stage in the future.
And this is the second project where you have, that I know of anyway, where you are essentially giving all of the proceeds to charity. Yes. And you've mentioned a few of the charities there. Why is this important to you?
I can't see the point in doing things just to sell it and make a little bit of money for yourself. Well, perhaps I'm in a fortunate position that I don't need to do that. So it seemed a good idea. As you say, I collaborated a couple of years ago with another old friend, Ian Coulson, on Douglas in Passing, for which he did artwork and I wrote it. That was much more heavyweight in that it required a lot of research, which I enjoyed very much at the time. But I think my attention span's got a bit shorter since then, so it's much easier to write silly poems.
And how do you choose the charities that you want to support?
Partly through personal, there were ones where friends of mine were involved or something already. We did ask a couple. I won't tell you who it was, but one to whom we offered it turned us down on the basis that the poems were too adult.
That makes me want to buy it immediately.
Exactly. But they didn't want to risk it.
That's fantastic. Well, we mentioned that all of the monies will be going to these charities, and you have a target you want to try and hit. But in order to do that, you need to get the thing produced in the first place. So that's what we're talking to you about at the moment, because you're looking for support there, aren't you?
Yes. We need £2,000 to produce it, and we've got about 1,250 already. So we desperately need a bit more. We started approaching companies that I think a lot of, particularly retail companies nowadays, are really struggling and can't afford to give to charity. So any individual who might like to cough up £50, we would be very pleased. Perhaps you could liaise with them on my behalf.
I think we could do that for you, yes. And do you have a sort of deadline or a target for when you want this to be released?
We would like to get it printed in the first half of October, so that the charities have then got the opportunity of selling the books in the run-up to Christmas. Well, there's no time limit on once they've got their books, they can take several years to sell them if they want to. We're suggesting that the books should be sold for £10 each, or people can give more if they can afford it.
And those 4 charities, again, Beach Buddies, Crossroads, Housing Matters and the Manx Wildlife Trust, they'll each get 100 books to sell at their will, wherever they might be. So if they all sell and get a minimum of the £10 cover charge, hopefully more, they should make £1,000 for each charity. What's not to like? But yes, we're still looking for a bit more cash to cover production costs. So if you can help, do get in touch and I'll let Mum know. Howard Kane at manxradio.com. That's it for this week. Don't forget, if you want to hear anything again, go to manxradio.com, download the Spotlight podcast, listen where and when you want. Why not try it while spending another week staring at the sky, thinking, is summer going to arrive? And the answer is no, it's not. It's autumn. See you next week. Until then, look after yourselves. Whatever you're doing, be creative about it. Cheerio.